G'day, battlers, and today we're jumping in for another Go Battle League meta that is also eligible for the Silver Arena for the next 2 weeks from when I upload this video. So today we are going to be talking about the Spring Cup Great League Edition. So Spring Cup is a really simple meta. It's Great League 1500, and then only Pokemon with typings of Water, Grass, and Fairy are allowed, with one single ban being Toxapex down there, just because Toxapex would be very powerful in a meta full of Fairies, weak to poison, Grass, weak to poison, and, there's some water types, but a lot of them would be taking neutral damage from Toxapex regardless. So Toxapex banned, but everything else is eligible. So let's take a look at the graphic. Hiya! For the thumbnail, now we've got 3 main groups over there, and we've got a couple side grades down below. The side grades are important, so we'll try and sort of breathe through this relatively quickly so we can sort of talk about the sort of nuts and bolts of the meta. So main graphic, we have 3 groups over there. We have the water types in the top, so we've got Pelipper, Walrein, Swampert, and Lantern. In the bottom left, we have the grass types. We've got Ferrothorn, Abomasnow, and Trevenant on there. And then down there, it's sort of like the fairies group. We have Mawile and Galarian Weezing in there. And then we also have Tentacruel. So it's sort of morphed into an anti-grass group that is also generally going to be weak to the waters. And because we've only got the 3 groups there, it's really easy to understand. So it's just thinking about the types in this meta, water, grass, fairy, instantly you're kind of like, well, grass is going to beat water. But there aren't really any other typing relationships. So the way it sort of works out is that the water types sort of provide really good neutral damage up against the fairies, whereas the fairies just don't have that damage to throw back. So Swampert is just able to annihilate, all 3. Lantern does really well because it's got so much bulk. Walrein has access to Earthquake, which is super effective to Mawile, and Galarian Weezing because of its poison typing, and Tentacruel because of that poison typing as well. Same with Swampert with Earthquake as well. And then Pelipper is just sort of able to provide a lot of neutral damage as well, really spamming Weather Balls, especially post Wing Attack buff. At some point, we're going to have to stop talking about the Wing Attack buff because it's been in the game for 6 months now or something. And so we'll stop saying it eventually, but that isn't today. And then the grass types are just doing a lot of neutral damage there. Pelipper does have the flying type, and it's got access to Hurricane. So, Trevenant would be very scared of a Hurricane, but in general, Trevenant is actually able to eke the win out, assuming you're able to land a Shadow Ball through. Now, that's sort of the main graphic. And just in case you weren't aware, actually, Galarian Weezing, it's got Brutal Swing, it's got Overheat providing a lot of big damage to those grasses, but it does open up room for Galarian Weezing to be a little bit of a sim hero where you need to land that Overheat to get some of the wins. Against something like Trevenant, you can just go straight Brutal Swing and you're looking pretty. But yeah, a lot of the matchups are a little bit temperamental, I guess. So it's not the most consistent Pokemon in the meta. And then Tentacruel is also sort of an it's an anti-Galarian Weezing because Weezing has the fairy type, but Mawile sort of holds its own a little bit better with the steel typing. Regardless, we'll talk about the side grades. So the thing about water types and grass types is that there's sort of a sliding scale depending on how much you want to counter the grasses and how much you want to counter the waters. So for example, Araquanid, bug water type. So it's sort of leaning into the bug role. It's sort of acting a little bit more as a grass counter, but still not having a lot of damage for those grasses. And then generally you're going to be losing to water types like Lantern, who's just able to annihilate you. Grass flyers, so Jumpluff and Tropius, they're sort of leaning back a little bit more towards the countering grass types, but they've still got access to grass moves, so they can still counter some water types. It just might mean that you might end up losing to Pelipper with the flying damage or Walrein with the ice damage. Generally, I think they're still looking pretty good up against the Lantern with the electric damage. And Swampert doesn't really have anything to throw unless you're deciding to run Sludge Wave Swampert, which I would sort of strongly recommend Earthquake, but I think that Sludge Wave definitely has a role, and with the nature of Go Battle League, it's about building a team that sort of complements each other. So, if that's what fits on your team, go for it. It's definitely a very usable Pokemon, and Hydro Cannon is always there as well. Although a lot of the meta doesn't actually care about Hydro Cannon, which is actually why Swampert is relatively low on the PvPoke rankings. I just think it's sort of really usable, so I've sort of shoved it in there. Skipped over Mantine as well. It was a water type that sort of starts to go back into countering grasses. So again, a little bit of a sliding scale. As you start to pick up some matchups, you're generally going to lose the others. So you can sort of choose your grass type or your water type to sort of be what you need it to be what you're comfortable with. There's also a fairy side grade in Alolan Ninetales. Now, Alolan Ninetales is in a bit of a weird spot. So, Powder Snow Alolan Ninetales acts as a pretty decent grass type counter. Abomasnow has the ice typing as well, but Ferrothorn is the only thing that you're sort of like a little bit walled against. Ferrothorn moveset is actually something that I probably should have mentioned as well. So I think the big three for your consideration are Power Whip, Flash Cannon, and Thunder. Power Whip gives you really good coverage up against like the Lantern and the Swampert. It does actually give you an okay time up against Pelipper as well. Metal one, Flash Cannon gives you good fairy matchups, really exclusively Galarian Weezing and also Alolan Ninetales if that happens to be big. Also gives you a little bit of ice coverage, Abomasnow is around as well, does okay there. And then Thunder gives you sort of flyer coverage towards like, nuking the Pelippers, the Mantines, and also just doing a really big amount of damage to things like Araquanid, who have the bug typing that don't care as much about Power Whips. So there's sort of, I can see a Ferrothorn running any two of those three movesets. You could actually ditch Power Whip, sort of relying a little bit more on the Thunder. Now, Swampert would then be a bit of a problem for you. But again, I'm not sure how big Swampert is going to be just because it isn't that big on PvPoke because the Hydro Cannons aren't really doing as much as they usually would. I still think that it's useful. You might see some. I don't think it's going to be the number one pick. So you might be a little bit safer. Like, you might be okay going for a Flash Cannon Thunder Ferrothorn, but something you could have play with. And, I think it's got Acid Spray as well. So if you really want to go super spicy, that is the way to go. But speaking of super spicy, I have put in a 6th Pokemon in the side grade box, and that is Wailmer. Is that because it is any good in the Spring Cup meta? Absolutely not. But for those who aren't following me on Twitter, I did just, this weekend just gone at Sydney Regionals, I brought Wailmer and ended up coming top 6 out of the 54 people that were there. So, it doesn't have to be good in the meta. No one would say that Wailmer is good in the Great League meta, but it was there and it got some wins. I think the record was 6-2 with Wailmer on the team. So, it's there if you feel like using it. But with that said, that is my Spring Cup Meta Simplified infographic. And yeah, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, especially that subscribe one. And thank you to my patrons for being absolutely lovely people because, they are the best in the world. So I will see you in the next one. I was under the whole time. Whoa. But yeah, see you in the next one. Not sure what it's going to be, but I will see you there regardless.